Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
Graham Potter took charge of his first Chelsea and Champions League match when the Blues hosted Salzburg. After a strong start to the match, the game did finish 1-1, with Sterling and Okafor scoring for the two sides. But what tactics did Potter use in his first game? Let's take a look, and we'll focus on Chelsea in possession. On paper, it may have looked like Chelsea were lining up with the traditional back four, but it quickly became apparent that it was actually a back three, with Cucurella playing as the left centre-back, whilst James and Sterling would provide the width. And Salzburg were not always active in the press, and instead their main focus was on cutting out Jorginho, who was the hub of the team. And this could be done by keeping their centre-forwards deeper, as well as having their attacking midfielder ready to press him just in case. But this is not to say that Salzburg were always reactive in their defensive situations. In fact, with Chelsea building up with a back three, Salzburg could switch to a front three of their own to press, with one forward moving onto the wide centre-back, the remaining one moving onto Silva, whilst the wider central midfielder, depending on which side the ball was, would then press the third centre-back. So these man-to-man situations made it much more difficult for Chelsea to play out. So here, we can see that initially, Salzburg's main goal is to cut out Jorginho by keeping him within this triangle. But run it on, and we see the left central midfielder is now pushing out onto Azpilicueta, so this is more of a man-to-man situation now in the press. And as you'll see later on, it's important to note that this could then leave Mount free. But Potter is flexible, and he likes his sides to play possession, and to do so he needed the numerical advantage in these regions. So Kepa became important in the build-up phase, as he could then push up so that Chelsea would effectively look like they had a traditional back four, with Kepa being one of the centre-backs. This would then mean they had a 4 versus 3 advantage, and when one of the pressing men moved onto a centre-back, it would then potentially leave the full-back free to receive, or a pass into midfield. So as you can tell, a ball-playing keeper will be very important to Potter's system. So as you can see, Salzburg look ready to press with the front three, and already Chelsea have shifted to what looks like more of a traditional back four, with Kepa being the second centre-back. And this is in an open play situation, where again, Salzburg has shifted to a front three. And again we see Kepa being crucial in the build-up phase. So now we see that it's Thiago Silva on the ball, and having drawn the forward inwards, now there is space for Cucurella out on the flanks. And he is then able to receive in some space. But in general open play, Chelsea's shape was even more interesting. It would generally look like this, a 3-4-3 diamond, although realistically, it could be described as more of a 3-1-3-3, as both Kovacic and Mount could push up extremely high in order to force Salzburg's own midfielder deeper. And this shape would also make the most of Reece James's attacking instincts out on the right hand side, while Sterling, as the wide man, would also thrive as he's naturally a winger. So here we see that shape higher up in open play. The back three, Jorginho as the hub being the single pivot, a further midfield three ahead of that of Kovacic in the left half space, Havertz in behind Aubameyang, as well as Mount in the right half space. And in advance of them, we have Reece James out on the right hand side, Aubameyang as a centre forward, and Sterling out here, out of shot. So the advantage of this shape for Potter is that it allows them to maintain their width out on the flanks, but at the same time, with 4 dedicated midfielders, they're able to overload most midfields, who use either a 2 or a 3. But that wasn't the case in this match, as Salzburg also used a midfield diamond. So, for the most part, they were in man-to-man situations, and this would make progression through the midfield extremely difficult. And in fact, Jorginho, or any of the other Chelsea men, would for the most part receive under pressure, so Chelsea were playing a dangerous game at times. So again here, we see that Salzburg have switched to pressing with the front three, and it looks like Jorginho is the free man. But as discussed, the attacking midfielder was always ready to apply pressure onto him, and Kepa plays an incredibly poor pass into him. And Chelsea just about get away with it, as a foul is committed when Salzburg were looking dangerous. But under pressure and the centre difficult to play through, we saw Chelsea's wider midfielders become crucial. They would often drop deeper initially, either to create a passing option, or alternatively, with Salzburg pressing, this would mean that their midfield was dragged higher up, creating slightly more space between the lines. And we did see at times Chelsea were willing to take risks and attempt passes into Havertz, who would try to make himself available between the lines, although he was often quickly closed down. One way they did have success with this was through Havertz and Aubameyang using opposing movements at times. So, Havertz would initially make the run in behind, temporarily dragging the midfielder with him, whilst Aubameyang would then drop deep to receive. So here we see a situation where once again, Salzburg are pressing high up, and particularly looking to cover Jorginho. So, Kepa then looks to make a more penetrative pass into Havertz, who is dropping deeper to provide an option, but as we can see he's picked up man to man, so it's difficult for him to make any difference. But although it didn't happen often, Chelsea did have success through the centre at times. And this was primarily because, as discussed, when Salzburg were pressing and switched to a 3, it would mean that a wider midfielder had to apply pressure. Or, even if Salzburg were looking to be more passive, Chelsea's wide centre-backs were effective at driving up the pitch so that a midfielder would then be drawn into the press. This would then free Kovacic or Mount, if this was happening on the right-hand side, to then move into these regions to receive and then drive higher up the pitch, as the respective wingers would be pinning the fullbacks deep, whilst Havertz's movement here makes it hard for the defensive midfielder to cover across. As we can see in this situation, Cucurella is deep, and this has drawn Salzburg's wider midfielder towards him. As a result, Kovacic has space in behind him to potentially receive. But the weakness of a midfield diamond, for most sides, is that it means that there is only one man wide, in this case the fullbacks for Salzburg. But this is advantageous for Chelsea as it means natural 1 versus 1s. So one of the goals was to get the ball out to Sterling, as he would be 1 versus 1 against his fullback and he could run at him, and this led to many dangerous crossing situations. But one of the most interesting things was the role of Kovacic when Sterling did get the ball wide in these regions. Usually he would be the deeper of Kovacic and Mount, but as soon as Sterling got the ball, he would make lung-busting runs into this half-space region. And this could lead to a few different scenarios. When Kovacic made this run, if it was the wider midfielder who tracked him, it would temporarily create space in this region, so Sterling could then cut into the space and look for a shot, or to find a more incisive pass to a forward ahead of him. So this was a situation that Chelsea were looking for throughout the game, Sterling 1 versus 1 with his fullback. And we can already see Kovacic is beginning to make his move, in between the centre-back and the full-back. And in this situation, the midfielder tracks him well. But Kovacic's movement has now opened up space in this region that Sterling can look to attack. And he gets into a decent region where passing options are available to him, but he is brought down. At the same time, for example, if the midfielder had been pressing Cucurella and hadn't recovered in time, when Kovacic made this run, it could be the centre-back who was dragged across. This could then open up the pass directly towards Aubameyang. Or, if it was the defensive midfielder who came across, Havertz would then be the option. And all of a sudden, they would be in zone 14, looking to make the difference. So, the ball is on its way to Sterling, but already Kovacic knows his role and is making that run. And we can see that this time, it is a defensive midfielder, rather than the wide midfielder who is looking to track Kovacic. As a result, Havertz is now free in zone 14 to receive from Sterling. And they exchange a quick 1-2, leading to Sterling in a decent position. Again, Sterling on the ball, Kovacic immediately making the run. And this time, neither the wide midfielder nor the defensive midfielder can track Kovacic's movement. So it is up to the centre-back who is dragged across, and this now opens up the pass into Aubameyang. And he receives in an extremely dangerous position, but can't finish. But if it was a slower attack, with the midfield completely settled in their shape, Chelsea would still look to take advantage of the wide regions. And this is because when Sterling received and was 1 versus 1 with his fullback, Cucurella could still overlap as he is naturally a fullback and look to receive the ball and then cross it in. And the same could happen on the right hand side with Azpilicueta, James and Mount. But as you can see, this does leave a massive gap for the potential transition, and this actually plays a role in the goal that Chelsea conceded. So as we can see, Cucurella was moving extremely high up on the attack to join Sterling and Kovacic. There's a turnover and now he's badly out of position. So although Jorginho is looking to cover, he's not as defensively astute. So the ball does come in. Silva does tackle and Salzburg do get lucky, but in the end when the cross comes in, they're able to finish. And those combinations we talked about on the left were just as prominent on the right and lead to the goal. So, as we can see, James is able to receive the ball deeper, drawing the fullback higher up the pitch. Mount has immediately looked to attack the space that is vacated, although the wider midfielder does look to cover. But Mount is still able to receive, and now the centre-backs are being dragged across. And when he gets the ball in, it should have been cut out, but instead, breaks to Sterling, who is able to finish. Overall, it was a solid first performance from Potter, but there is definitely room for improvement. The formation shows the potential to overload teams who don't use midfield diamonds, and could also see the wide men flourish in 1-versus-1 situations. But on a tactical level, Potter earns a 6. But what are your thoughts? Drop them down below.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might enjoy the content available on my Patreon. Not only does Patreon help to support the continued production of content, as I am a one-man team, but it also gives you early access to videos that will come on the channel. You'll also get exclusive videos, get to vote on polls, and so much more. And it's cheaper than ever, no longer having a tier system, so everyone on the Patreon gets access to all the content. So head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple to check it out.
But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.